Welcome back to another episode of Flavors and Knowledge, the podcast where we dive deep into the art of cooking, the science behind ingredients, and the rich stories that make food so much more than just a meal. I'm your host, Ethan Clark, speaking from Chef Walter's Cooking School in Rhode Island, USA, bringing you narrated, factual culinary education with honest food talk and a few opinions along the way. So let's explore the diverse world of flavors together. This episode is titled, The President and the Pasta. Thomas Jefferson's Macaroni Machine. How America's third president brought a revolutionary kitchen tool home from Europe and changed the way the nation ate. It's a curious detail in American history that the man who wrote the Declaration of Independence and negotiated the Louisiana Purchase is also remembered, at least among food lovers, for his deep love of pasta. Thomas Jefferson, the influential Virginia statesman and third president of the United States from 1801 to 1809, truly enjoyed macaroni. For him, a simple love of food often turned into something more complex, a machine. Jefferson's interest in macaroni began in Europe, as did many of his other interests. From 1784 to 1789, he was the American minister to France, and those years in Paris changed him. He returned with a love for French wines, a passion for architecture inspired by ancient Rome, and a lasting appreciation for European food. Italy especially caught his attention. During a trip through northern Italy in 1787, Jefferson discovered macaroni in its homeland, where Italians had been making long, golden pasta tubes for centuries. He liked the dish so much that he did what any inventive person of his time might do. He drew it. Among Jefferson's papers at the Library of Congress is a hand-drawn diagram, written in his neat handwriting, of a pasta-making machine. The sketch, probably made during or soon after his 1787 trip to Italy, shows a device with a cylindrical chamber, a plunger, and a perforated end. This is similar to what we now call a pasta extruder. Jefferson carefully labeled the parts and wrote down the measurements, showing the same attention to detail he used in his other projects. When Jefferson came back to America in 1789, he brought European tastes and ideas with him, including pasta. He is often credited with introducing macaroni to American dining, or at least making it popular among the upper class. As Secretary of State under George Washington and later as Vice President, Jefferson served macaroni at his dinner parties, surprising guests accustomed to simpler colonial fare. The machine that Jefferson had carefully sketched was ordered and brought back from Europe. It's not certain whether he built his own version from his drawings or imported a finished machine, but it's clear that Jefferson became dedicated enough to pasta making that he wanted to make it himself at home. At Monticello, his home in Virginia, he and his enslaved staff made macaroni using the extruder. The macaroni machine worked on a simple but clever idea. Dough made from semolina flour and water was packed into the machine's barrel. A large screw or plunger was turned or pressed, pushing the dough through a brass or iron plate with holes of a certain shape and size. As the dough was forced through, it came out as long, even tubes of pasta. These tubes were dried before cooking. Jefferson's version, based on his sketch and historical records, made pasta tubes about as thick as a finger, more like what we now call rigatoni or large penne, than the thin strands people often picture when they think of macaroni. When Jefferson became president in 1801 and moved into the executive mansion, which was not yet called the White House, he brought his love of good food with him. He hired French chef Honoré Julien, and together they created some of the most refined and international meals in the young country. Macaroni was often served at Jefferson's table, offered to senators, diplomats, and guests who may never have tried it before. It was at one such presidential dinner in 1802 that a guest, the Reverend Manasseh Cutler, encountered the dish and left behind one of the most famous, if slightly baffled, accounts of it in American history. Cutler described what he called a pie called macaroni, noting that it appeared to be some kind of pasta baked in a crust, richly sauced and quite unlike anything he had eaten before. Historians have puzzled over his description, but the episode illustrates the dish's novelty for many Americans of the period. Jefferson was, in a very real sense, introducing his fellow citizens to pasta. To see why Jefferson wanted not just to eat pasta, but also to get and maybe improve the machine that made it, you have to understand what he was like. Jefferson was, above all, a product of the Enlightenment, a time that valued reason, science, and technology as means to improve life. He was always tinkering, designing a better plow, inventing a wheel cipher for secret messages, and filling his home with gadgets and tools to save work. The macaroni machine fit right in with his interests. Jefferson also cared a lot about American farming, and he saw pasta as a way to use wheat grown in the United States. If Americans could be convinced to eat macaroni, a simple, healthy, and affordable dish when made from local grain, it could help the farmers he respected and reduce the need for imported food. His excitement about the macaroni machine was not just about food, but also about his belief in a nation of self-reliant farmers. Some food writers give Jefferson too much credit for American pasta history. He did not, as some claim, introduce macaroni to the continent by himself, and he was not the first American to try it. Still, his love for the dish and his efforts to make it at home with a special machine make him an important part of pasta's story in America. He helped turn pasta from a foreign novelty into a dish served at the president's table. His drawing of the macaroni machine remains a charming example of his curious mind. Even while building a nation, Jefferson found time to focus on the joys of food and the tools used to make it. Among his constitutions, land surveys, and blueprints, there is also a careful drawing of a pasta extruder. It reminds us that the founding fathers were also just people with interests and appetites, who enjoyed their meals and sometimes built machines to make them better. Today, when an American family sits down to a bowl of macaroni and cheese, that classic comfort food, they are in a small way connected to Thomas Jefferson's fascination with pasta. The machine has changed and become industrial, but the idea remains the same. Dough pushed through a mold, becoming something new and nourishing that has traveled far to reach the table. Ultimately, thanks for listening and the privilege of your time. In conclusion, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us on today's journey through flavor and discovery. You'll find all the relevant links in the show notes, including details on our cooking classes, the full notes and recipes from this episode, and our calendar for culinary tourism tour. Be sure to subscribe to our free newsletter to stay connected and informed. Remember to taste thoughtfully, cook with passion, and continue exploring the boundless world of food. Subscribe for more, share with a fellow food enthusiast, and we'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep your eyes on the fire and stay curious. The content for this episode is written by Chef Walter and produced by Simval Media, USA.